Welcome, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at 3:04 p.m. Maybe we'll briefly do some introductions. My name is Jack Lamatz. I'm the chair of this committee.
I'm Colin McQuaid.
Michael Moscato.
I'm Dan Monks. I'm not on the committee. I'm the assistant manager.
Drew.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Drew Lerman.
I'm Rebecca Sentner. I'm the vice chair of this committee.
And Jim Virus.
And we have with us Stu Hurd, our liaison, and a few members of the public, which is wonderful. We'll begin by reviewing the minutes from our last couple meetings. We neglected to approve the minutes from our August 9th meeting, so we'll do that first. The minutes were sent out with the agenda, both sets of minutes. Were there any changes or additions or deletions from the August 9th minutes?
I make a motion to accept the minutes.
Great.
I'll second.
Any objections?
No.
Great. Then we'll mark the August 9th minutes approved.
I should ask for a vote.
Okay. A vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Great. It's unanimous. We'll look at the August 23rd minutes. Are there any changes or adjustments to the August 23rd minutes?
Yeah, I had one thing, one maybe modification. Under the committees section of the minutes, it has, for the other subcommittee, that it would include public comments, and I think we had decided that the admin subcommittee would handle public comments overall, and that the other committee would just be looking at anything that came in through public comments that was outside the scope of the other subcommittees.
Mm-hmm.
So just to be clear.
That's my recollection as well. Any debate on that?
I move we accept the minutes with the amended change.
Okay. Second?
I second.
Thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Wonderful. Stu, can you
I will
amend the
chastise
minutes?
the secretary.
Wonderful.
Let's note that in this week's minutes.
So noted.
All right. We'll move on to a section that I think has been much lauded, public comments review. We have received a number of comments to date, so I will read the comments as they've come in, have some brief discussion, and then decide if we will refer them to a subcommittee or if it's just narrative in nature and there's no real suggestion there, we'll just note it for our own information. So the first comment that we received was from Jim Vyers. Jim says, relating to section 103-511, local option tax, consider the addition of subparagraph 5, a 1% tax on short-term rental fees. Any discussion on that?
Yeah, just send that to the housing committee,
Property?
and yeah, it's definitely a topic that's come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
That makes sense to me, yeah.
Properties committee, take note. The next comment is from Peter, excuse me if I get this incorrect, Odierna. Peter says, I strongly recommend term limits for the town manager position. Nearly 50 years on the town's payroll is way too long, especially with no track record of success. Any discussion on this?
That seems to fall under the governance
Yeah.
subcommittee.
I think so.
agree.
Yeah, great. All agreed?
Mm-hmm.
Great. We'll send that to governance and look for a response. My next comment is from Kim Likakis. In the spirit of 2009 Vermont Code Title 10, Chapter 24, Outdoor Lighting, I would like the town of Bennington to express its appreciation of and desire for the unfettered enjoyment by its citizens of the beauty of the natural, dark Vermont nighttime sky by forbidding the use of high-powered lighting which is undirected, unlouvered, and carelessly directed to intrude on neighboring properties. Any discussion?
Oh, I was just gonna say that, in the other committee, we talked about this one, but we felt that it seemed to be more of like an ordinance thing than a charter thing. That's just our take on it, and how everybody else feels, but.
That was my immediate thought was I don't know if this is our issue.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you wanted to take this up, you'd want to look at like how many lumens, which seems like with the noise ordinance, how many decibels, and so I think that's a good clue that it
So
seems
the
like an
town already
ordinance.
does regulate lighting,
Okay.
so we could certainly, if there's something in there that needs to be expanded, they may be referring to residential neighbors impacting other residential neighbors. We would have the authority to do that if the select board so desired, so there's no charter change necessary for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Great. So we appreciate that comment. Next comment is from Maria Corrales. Maria says, yesterday our select board finalized the charter committee charge, adding their suggestions too. This allows the review process to begin, but it also means public still has opportunity to make their suggestions. 7 members of the Charter Revision Committee will be chosen, receiving its charge to analyze contents of Bennington, Vermont's charter regarding anachronisms and items to be deleted, amended, or added, if needed, line by line. For this reason, I would like to add my suggestion, and the following was submitted on their town website. Every 5 years, Bennington, Vermont shall have the authority to change any directives and powers defined, an emphasized extension, written language found within town budgets, policies, procedures, and rules, including enabling voter participation, qualifications defined within our federal constitution, which has supremacy, as citizenship of the United States and at least age 18, and state legislative requirements as residents in the state of Vermont. Voters empowered by Australian ballot with the goal of ensuring true transparency, prior disclosures to avoid conflict of interests and accountability. It's a lot there. Any discussion? As far as I looked a little closely at this, it sort of seems like there's maybe 2 issues that Maria's trying to raise. About every 5 years, authority to change directives and powers defined might fall under governance. And then later she mentions as citizenship of the United States and at least age 18. Looks like maybe it's targeting the charge for voting, expanding voting access. So I would think maybe we could refer this comment to both those committees.
I would bring this up for discussion. It seems like Charter Review Committee does meet every 5 years.
Right.
Doesn't that cover the first
It was
part?
more of a statement of what actually happened.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I would say additionally, because this looks like pretty wide scope here,
Mm-hmm.
is that that is the charge of our committee.
Yeah.
Essentially, is
Yeah.
to meet every 5 years and look at the charter.
Which includes in this particular charge voting.
Right.
I think one of the things that might be helpful is in marketing to the general public for their submissions, an emphasis on being specific versus general, so that there is more of a way for us to have an application to assist them in their concern versus trying to interpret it. I'd rather be able to have it defined versus interpret the intention of somebody.
Yeah.
It would be more intentional, because otherwise, we don't know if our answer is going to be satisfactory to the person that wrote in.
I was going to suggest that we just answered part one of a comment, and good for us. Because honestly, I'm being facetious, but yeah, we are taking it serious, and we are addressing it, and we're addressing it, on where it's televised, and so we're taking this serious, and we do appreciate it.
Yeah, I know, certainly. I appreciate all the comments. I don't know if there's a way to add something to the website that asks for, some of that specificity. Although I imagine before I got involved with this committee, I wouldn't have really been sure, what sort of specificity would have been helpful for the charter, right?
That's
So
fair.
rather than dissuading people from commenting.
Yeah,
But
we can do that.
Yeah,
We
okay.
we can
Right.
clarify.
Maybe
it.
even something just to better assist them.
Mm-hmm.
Or try to be as specific as
Try to-
possible.
yeah.
And certainly if Maria is out there watching or and wants to clarify the intent of this, we'd be happy to hear that.
Yeah.
The meetings are open. Yeah.
Anything more on this comment? Great. Our next comment is from Clark Adams. Clark says, "The town select board will conduct a minimum of quarterly open meetings where individuals may present their concerns to be discussed in a public forum." Any discussion?
It probably goes towards governance,
I
right?
think so
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah. Our next comment is from Clark Adams. Clark comments, "All individuals appointed by the town select board to any external organization, commission, or committee will be required to act in the best interest of the residents of Bennington above the assigned entity's goals or agenda." Any discussion on this?
I think that based on the questions that we had to respond to as part of the interview process, this was part of it. I mean, I'm sure it goes without saying that will do its best interest of the residents of Bennington.
I
Yeah,
think
I looked closely at this too, sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
And I don't think this comment, as it's written, would even apply to this board or this committee. We're not an external board or committee, we're an internal board or committee. So I think there's actually just a small handful of appointments that this would apply to. The library, the BBC, and the rescue squad are, I think, the only external organizations that the select board appoints members to. And I don't think any of those are voting positions. But
I think the way I interpreted the question, it was touching on perhaps conflicts of interest, making sure that they're, whoever is appointed, selected, so there's a process for that, right? That's the interview process, as Drew pointed out. That goes through governance, with our charter. Perhaps there is language in there that can define a more structured setting that would eliminate anybody's concerns of conflict of interest. I think we'd all want people to work in the best interest of the town, whether it's at the town or our charter, or
Or through our conflicts of interest,
that there's a process to
Yeah,
address them,
sure.
perhaps. I don't know. It's something maybe to take a look at in governance.
You can
Maybe
definitely
not.
take a look at it.
Yeah, we do have a conflict of interest policy that is for boards and commissions. We'll share it with you. I don't think we'll
Okay.
put that in your original packet.
Okay.
I mean, we do that at the hospital. We have to all fill out a conflict of interest. So,
yeah, so we'll send that to governance. The next comment is from Clark Adams. Clark writes, "The recruitment and selection process to fill vacant town manager and assistant town manager positions will be from at least a regional search, preferably nationwide, to identify candidates for these positions." Discussion?
I don't know that that's something our charter can address. because that involves, number one, a budget. There's cost that goes with recruitment, bringing in perhaps a service to do that. How do you market to someone on the West Coast? Those are perhaps issues for the select committee.
I would think that it's the select committee that has the power to do that.
The governance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they oversee the town manager who prepares the budget and whatnot. So I think that would be something at the select board.
I don't know that there's anything within our charter capacity
Oh, I see.
that would be able to have an impact to the select board. That seems like something that the public would take to the select board, then the select board themselves would decide. I don't know that that has to be within the charter. I don't know, maybe governance takes a look at that.
Well, I think we could take a look at it. One possibility is perhaps just even something like wording best standard practices. Not that so there's no specificity, because there would be too many different situations that could come up. But we can definitely discuss it and consider it. That's for sure.
Yeah, my instinct is that, like, when they talk about at least a regional search, like what qualifies as a regional search? If you have two people from two different states, is that regional enough? Like, it just...
Well, you're suggesting a nationwide, so I mean, that's pretty broad.
Do you need like one person from every state then? Like, right, so I think we'd want to have some more specificity if we even took it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion there, right? Like, me being new, I'm relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't want to walk in and run a town that I don't know. So.
Right.
I would imagine a minimum they'd have to be a resident. They'd have to relocate in order to do that role anyway. So, I mean, yeah.
All right, let's let governance dig into it more. My instinct is...
My suggestion is, I think what our subcommittee might do is we'll invite Mr. Adams in and have a conversation with him and to see what specifically he's looking for and suggesting, and we can base more from there.
Sure.
Okay, would that be okay?
Mr. Adams, I think this is your comment. I hope you'll be able to
You've been name dropped, sir.
bring that, expound on that for that subcommittee.
Oh, whatever I can do to help, fine.
I'll get a hold of you.
Our next comment is from Clark Adams. Clark writes, any elected town official must swear an oath to the U.S. Constitution before beginning their term of office. Discussion on this one.
Are none of our officials sworn into office in any way? So that's not a thing here?
Select board are sworn in office, and the oath contains allegiance to the state of Vermont. I don't know that it mentions specifically the U.S. Constitution.
Oh.
That's a state, isn't that a state oath by statute?
I believe it is.
I don't know.
Okay. Is that something that could be changed in the charter?
That's an interesting question.
Because if it's a state required oath, then I don't know if we even have power over
It may
that.
be a take legislative action if you want to change
So that would probably have to be kicked.
I'll take a look. If you don't mind, I'll ask
Yeah.
council about that one.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, great.
All right.
All right. We have two additional comments that have come in. One from Vicky Lamprin. Vicky writes, good morning. Yesterday I was at a going off to college party for my oldest granddaughter. I was sitting with three young women, and they brought up the discussion of the Charter Review Committee and the charge to consider allowing 16 to 17-year-olds to vote in local town elections. Two of the young ladies are soon off to their first year of college, and the other will be a senior at MAU this year. All three felt that giving the option to 16 to 17-year-old students to vote in local elections is an idea they were all excited about, and they see this as a way to give our young students a way to have a voice in our community. They also said that they felt it would help foster the idea of civic duty and help to increase voter turnout as they become eligible to vote in state and national elections. I encourage this committee to recommend this to our select board. Let's get these young adults on the voting train. Thank you, Vicki Lampert in Bennington. I think that's just in support of one of the charges that we've received that we're already looking at. So I hope the voting committee will take that into consideration. Anything else on that comment? Great. Last one. We received a comment from, again, another tough last name, Doris Hawkshurst. Doris writes, with the advent of storefront churches popping up in Bennington, it would be advantageous to charter that Bennington schools have provide a secular education in accordance with the Constitution of the United States. Any discussion on this one?
We don't have control over schools, so it's really
Yeah.
not apropos to this discussion. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Doris, thank you for your comment. Any other discussion on public comments in general, in specific?
Just keep them coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
I mean, it's great to see this many coming in.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
I think these go back a month or so, so I don't know that we'll have this volume every meeting, but we'd certainly love to keep hearing from the community. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, discussing the work that subcommittees have done so far. We have highlighted two of those subcommittees that we'll give a little more time to today. So those are the voting and the other, which I've started calling the overflow subcommittee. So maybe we'll leave those for a minute and maybe just get brief reports from the remainder. Can we hear briefly what the admin committee has been up to?
Sure. I can take that on. So we met as a group. One of the things that we got started on was developing a format for the report, for the final report, and kind of talk through what the components of that report should be based on what the previous committee had included in theirs, and then also how we are dividing up the tasks in front of us. So we thought that the idea of creating a report that was formatted by the subcommittee topics would be the best way to go forward. So that is how we have formatted the report so far. So I'd be interested if anybody had any thoughts on that, or if everybody thinks that makes sense, or any.
That makes sense to me.
I think we'll be asking sort of each of the subcommittees in their sort of written piece to cover like a certain set of ideas in what they write. I wrote down just some general background on the research you've done and what you've looked at, including any community engagement that you've had. Your specific recommendations, even if that recommendation is no changes. Your rationale for making those recommendations, and any references that you might want to call out in relation to your recommendations. Additionally, we talked about having a section just for lessons learned.
Oh.
So, considering all the stakeholders, maybe, the next charter review committee in 5 years, right? So as you go through and do your work, if you, have ideas that you think might be helpful to the next group, that would be great. And then, as we discussed at last week's meeting, we'll look to have a section dedicated to our collective response to any public comments we've received. Great. Uh,
Who else is in that subcommittee? Is it just you two?
Andrew.
Andrew.
That should scare you.
I don't know if we want to just state, at least this
That's
first
a great
time,
idea.
who is on each subcommittee when we go around to it.
I still
don't
need to join a subcommittee too, so I was interested in about when subcommittees are meeting that have open spots, so I could join one of them.
Yeah. Can we talk about subcommittees for Colleen as part of subcommittee review? Yeah. So I think the open subcommittees right now, there's one spot available on governance, one spot available on community policing, and one spot available on overflow.
So I get to choose one or two?
Whatever you feel comfortable with. If you,
When do they meet? That's another question that's important, because I have
so far, my experience has been that subcommittees are sort of figuring out
Yeah.
amongst themselves what works for
So
their
a
2 or
little
3 members.
flexibility.
Yeah.
I would be interested in really joining the governance one
Okay.
and maybe the community policing one.
Okay.
Perfect.
Just so you know, the governance hasn't met yet.
Good, so I haven't missed anything.
Nope.
No.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay.
Put your initials here. Great. Okay. The next one I have is our properties subcommittee. Jim, can you?
Yeah, we actually had our first meeting on Wednesday. Carolyn was out of town and couldn't be here. So we have not, our subcommittee has not had a chance to discuss what we learned yet with her. We have a Zoom meeting scheduled for Monday. But it was with Dan Monks, Paul Danzero, Michael and I were there. It was
Paul
huge.
Danzero is.
Building inspector for the town.
Building
Thank you.
inspector.
He's great.
It was hugely informative. They gave us some background into what articles are covered with our charge. They told us about some of the different, not only vacant housing, but also vacant retail that they're looking at, and specifically some blighted retail that, one piece of blighted retail that they're looking at, industrial. We talked about what scope of responsibilities they have right now, and where specifically their hands are tied. Understandably, a lot of it is tied legislatively. Quite frankly, though, that doesn't mean that we can't come up with solutions in our subcommittee, present them to the select board. If the select board votes them up, then they're going to be voted, then the state legislature is going to have to look at them. And then that gives us, honestly, that gives us then, look, this is what the towns want. Can you guys be responsive? And, possibly, this is not a subcommittee thing, but then possibly we follow it up with a political action, following up with detailed, we would like a report back from our slate of representatives on what's being done and why it can't be done if it can't. So that's where we're at. We're just hitting the ground running. We have a standing invitation from both Dan and Paul. Anytime that we need to talk to them, that we can. It was, and by the way, honestly, thank you very much. It was hugely, they had very professional. I was out of my depth within 3 minutes. Thank God Michael was there.
Yeah.
But honestly, they made it easy to understand. They answered all the questions, and we talked from empty retail space, shop fronts. Why something can't be done now, possible remedies. We talked about a property that an abandoned business structure that had caught fire, and we can't even do anything with it because of liability possibilities. We talked about rentals, what we can and we cannot do. We talked about liens. There are so many different things involved with this that there are some remedies that we can come up with, but again, it is honestly going to come down to I think we need to use this as an impetus to push for better, stronger legislation. And I think that can be done.
It sounds like there's a myriad of barriers that can come up in
Yeah.
trying to deal with these properties. Yeah.
And we also talked about the neighbor, when neighbors have a complaint, just a regular, and to be quite frankly, I was the example that we used. I was having an issue with a neighbor, and it was just a simple matter of having your trash collected. But there are steps that have to be taken. And and even that can get expensive with legal fees with town representation if it gets contentious. But they went through what steps the town actually has to take. They can't just come in and go to a house and say, hey, by golly, you've got to do that. Even though Paul and Bridget are both health officers, they're not allowed. They still have to. They have to follow the governance and the restrictions and the guidelines we all do. So I look for a lot. I'm sorry, Michael, I'm taking up all the talk time, but I really think that a lot's going to come out of this committee. I'm glad that I'm on it. I do know I definitely wanted it just because of the experience that I've had with working with this is how you get something resolved and successfully resolved.
I think one thing I want to make, in the public setting with this being recorded is that that kind of meeting with that kind of presence with the background and the experience that can articulate from a state level, from a town level, if all of our subcommittees can have that kind of support to lean on, then this charter is going to be very successful to address the charges. The other thing is that, as most people are aware, there's a lot of red tape involved in government, and that a lot of times the charter can only work within a scope that it's able to. But I think the focus of us to create that recommendation at the end is going to be perhaps just as powerful as the report or any changes to the charter itself, because there are certain things that we can't address that we will need help on as a town, and that things that people may want or view as a town issue because it is local to them. We're going to need assistance at the state level to change some of this stuff. So it's important to know that at least in this committee, we were able to see that there's a lot of support here locally. That's really of great value.
Great. Thank you both. You both mentioned sort of some of the challenges being like that there's legislative support needed. My understanding is that a charter change is a legislative change. Is that not the same thing?
Well, let's look at it in terms of this committee is going to create a report of what we would like to see changed. That's going to go to the select board.
Right.
If there are the select board's got to kick certain things up to the state legislature in order for anything to actually be of impact for this group. So
No, actually, it goes to the select board, and then it gets voted on town meeting day,
Correct.
and then that goes up to the
Correct.
legislator,
Correct.
There
and
you
then
go.
maybe
Correct.
it happens.
I'm glad you're
Right.
a government.
So when we say we need
It's way
legislative
harder than
change,
even
right,
just that.
aren't the
Yes.
recommendations
Skip
we're
the step,
making
but yes.
to amend
Yeah.
the charter exactly
any
that?
charter changes that are made to the Bennington Charter become legislative action and become law, but they specifically relate to Bennington only. So if some of what you're suggesting is something that could help statewide, you may want to not make that a charter issue, but suggest the board take it to the legislature as a whole.
Oh, I see.
So you're not so focused on the broader issue.
Understood.
Just to clarify, most of the barriers that we face as we discuss with these folks are statewide processes, procedures, court processes, et cetera, that every single municipality, regardless of their charter, has to follow. So we could try to go it alone and change the process just for us, and that would be great for us, but it doesn't address the larger issue that's throughout the state. So it's it's a kind of a political decision. Do you just put it in the charter, or do you say, okay, state, step up and fix this for everybody? So.
Sure.
And while
I recently heard a legislator share that they saw charter changes as sometimes sort of a test bed for new policies, though, right? That
Yeah.
if they if we suggest that change for Bennington and they see it working well here, like, then that might give additional impetus for them to adopt it on a statewide level.
And also it would give other municipalities and towns the ability to make a change in their own charter and use Bennington as an example of a success story.
Mhm.
There are 257 towns. in
Yeah,
the
it would
state
take a lot of them.
Vermont. Not all of them have charters.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
And quite frankly, we're one of the larger municipalities in the state of Vermont. You know, we have the ability and the resources and the luxury to do this, to where some small towns just don't.
Sure.
And so this could be a motivational tool to help affect positive change for every municipality, or even unincorporated village when you come down to it. You know.
Which was also something we talked about.
Yeah. Like I say, it was a fascinating conversation.
Well, wonderful. Maybe properties will be high on the list for next month's or next week's focus topic.
Yeah.
Governance. Anything from a governance group?
We have not even met yet. You want to take this one, Drew?
Yeah, I would say that that we were waiting to get a third member.
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't have a complete committee in order to do that. Now we'll schedule a subcommittee meeting.
And that's you, Drew Lerman, Jim Byers, and Colin McQuaid now.
That's correct. And I think we got a sufficient amount of homework today.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to hearing about your first meeting.
Okay.
Community policing is next. Mike?
Myself and Jackie met and talked, got a lot of history, got a lot of background. I will be reaching out to the lovely ladies over there for input and discussion. I think this is one that there's, we have some conversations and some history there to lean back on, and authority was a big focus of the discussion. It was a good discussion without getting too into the weeds, but we see areas that are certainly going to be looked deep into. So I don't know if you want to speak further on.
I would just say that we've started the process of reaching out to the police chief and Lieutenant Grandy to get their perspective on this change. We've reached out to the Seaport Committee, looking to meet with several of their members who are joining us today. So if you'd like to speak to this for a minute, I would certainly allow some time for that, but no pressure.
Oh, the last note, we went over kind of a game plan and schedule of what we're looking to do, as well as in terms of structure, similar to maybe what you were doing with admin. Just not in as good detail.
We did have one question, the three of us, because we're all officers here. And it has to do with our understanding of the charge was that it was around autonomy. And yet last week when I was here, you spoke a lot about authority, and it sounds like in your subcommittee you also talked about authority. They're very different. So could you say a little bit more about what you're thinking, just so we can get a sense of what you might need from us in terms of feedback or information?
That's a good point, certainly.
I think that was the intention of sitting down and speaking with you, so that we can understand your interpretation and the general interpretation.
Sure.
And likewise with the police chief and
Sure.
And some of the restrictions from the legislative angle statewide.
Yeah.
Another thing that we talked about is especially, I know things are available for public comment, but input from the public on this issue is, I think vital to helping have that autonomy and authority, the proper discussions of authority and whatnot for that group. So
Looking forward to sitting down with you.
Yeah.
I guess I will just say for myself, the idea of autonomy, to me, I think means just the power to act independently. And so then for me, that sort of begs the question, act in what way, right? And so what would the committee be empowered to do autonomously? So, great. Any other discussion on CPARB autonomy? All right. Okay. We sort of skipped over voting a little bit. That was one of our focus topics for today. So I sat down with Carolyn on Wednesday, I believe. It's been a long week.
It was
Excuse me.
Okay.
And we had a good discussion about this. We were short one member, but we'll look to have Mike with us next time. So we talked a little bit about looking at like what precedent was available for allowing 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. There is one town in Bennington one town in Vermont that has already gotten this change into their own charter. That is Brattleboro. There's a handful of other municipalities across the country, although not as many as we were hoping to find. Strangely, most of them are in Maryland. We looked a little at whether someone 16, 17-year-old, has is sort of on the same cognitive footing as an adult, right? If they're able to sort of make these choices in an informed way. And the research that we've done there so far suggests that they're on equal footing with most adults. They're certainly susceptible to some bias, but so are adults, it turns out. One of the issues that often is raised sort of in opposition to 16 and 17-year-olds voting is that they're not adults, that they're not paying taxes the same way that a lot of adults do. But certainly a lot of 16 and 17-year-olds do work, right? And so they pay taxes in that way. They shop. They pay some taxes that way. So there is some level of commitment to this community in that sense. We began briefly talking about non-citizen residents, although we didn't go too far down into that discussion. There are 3 towns in Vermont that have allowed non-citizen residents to vote. Should clarify, in local elections, vote in local elections. One of the challenges that we've potentially surfaced in our conversation is we're assuming that both of these changes were to pass, looking at possibly that intersection of, say, a 16-year-old non-citizen resident, and that might be pretty challenging to just manage from an administrative standpoint. So we have reached out to Cassie Barbaro, who is the town clerk, and handles a lot of the elections, so we'll be looking to meet with her. Reach out actually to several other folks in the community. Jack Ambassador Munsley, who's the community engagement coordinator for ECDC, so very much involved in sort of the refugee resettlement issue. Thought he might have something valuable to say about non-citizen residents voting. A coach at one of the schools we reached out to. It's a small list, but certainly open to any other suggestions. So just to start the conversation, I thought I'd offer some of the background on what we've looked at and discussed so far. But certainly we'll have to come to a decision about how to proceed as a full subcommittee. So I open it to you now to start discussing what you think about these proposed changes.
I know one area for the committee to focus on is also understanding the impact of this specific charge in the charter, given even just most recent elections in the primary with such, I think the proper word would be abysmal turnout for voting. You could have 10 16-year-olds vote, and this is not in opposition to voter turnout, but effectively 5 people in one of the elections impacts a race, which I think is more of a commentary on the low turnout in general, but that's one area of focus on this. You brought up the taxpayers, so the non-citizen component, and that a lot of that has been expressed through the personal outreach that I've had as well with just people generally that I know around the area.
One other thing, I don't know if you've already started to do this, but one of the points that I hear in favor of allowing younger citizens to vote, 16, 17-year-olds, is that it improves their odds of becoming lifelong voters and becoming more engaged when they're 18 and able to vote in both state and national elections as well. And I didn't know if you've done any research to see if that is in fact true. I don't know if this is just, theoretical, or if this is actually, there's any evidence to support that.
That's one area that I want to dive into and find out not only what the numbers are, but where are those numbers actually coming from? Like, for instance, with the specific Maryland, so like that's not a litmus test for perhaps throughout the country. It's more focused in one area, getting into the demographics, the details of that area. Why does it potentially work for them there? And so
I have 2 comments, if I may.
Sure.
One is, to your point, I'd like to see the municipalities that did this change, what the, what's the feedback? And how did they measure, if they did, success? What measures success, when you do or you pass something like this? I would, if I knew that all of the 16, 17-year-olds articulated their thoughts as the comments, I would be fully in support of it. I mean, because they made all good points in their comments. But I would also like to talk to guidance counselors and principals to kind of get their thoughts of what they would think about something like this, since they deal with the age group regularly.
I think it's important to note also that young generations, they have a lot of investment in the decisions that are made for their lives, their futures, and that as a charter it's a very humbling experience to be potentially part of something that impacts that change, but it's also not something that should be taken lightly either, because this is of significant relevance to everything with this town. So in general, that hopefully the public understands that. I mean, we're this is not something taken lightly at all. So we're going to address every issue, and we really encourage public comment on everything, but specifically this. That it'd be nice to hear from it'd be nice to see public comment from a lot of the youth.
I have a question about this that's kind of random.
Sure.
It just popped into my head. If you allow voting for children that are 16 years old, what about things like political rallies or speaking to children in schools? Is there any restrictions around that? Because I don't really know how I feel about that. My kid's in school and all of a sudden they're getting all these political like messages because they're not allowed to vote at 16, and I don't really know how I feel about that as a parent and as a person, you know? Like is there any like restrictions on basically advertising politics to these children, you know? Like would you be allowed to go on and speak in their schools or talk to them and like try and gain support, you know? Like I that makes me feel weird.
I can tell you, as someone whose phone doesn't stop ringing at all hours of the night with donation requests via text message, that whatever rules are in place certainly don't generally work too well. But also, you know, coming from another part of the country, yes, there are politicians who are visiting schools, and yes, they are using their access to whoever they can. So that is something to be considered for, especially a younger age group, but to the point,
that's in places where they're not allowing minors to vote in local elections.
Correct.
Yeah.
So they're already doing it.
Yeah, they're already doing it, even though they're not eligible. I mean, but some people in federal elections, if you're not 18 yet, but will be 18, you are of voting age. You know, perhaps that's the focus of their access. But
In some situations, children have influence over their parents. You know, conversations
well,
around the dinner table.
social
different
media
things like
has
that, right?
changed the game
Yeah.
as well for a younger generation, which when we talk about you know, potentially being manipulated, or you know, whatever the proper word is for that, that's a real thing. And there's already concerns with social media platforms just in general and mental health surrounding that. There's a lot in this this issue for the subcommittee to consider, and I know that the three of us will do that. So,
And I think my question to that point is, what are we considering a municipal election? I don't consider sending somebody up to the state legislature necessarily municipal. I read that as a town, something that affects the town.
well, think of the turf vote. Could be, you know,
That would be a
there's
municipal
there's
election.
an
That would be
example.
nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Select board would be nonpartisan, supposedly, all of it. And the other thing is, I would love to hear, perhaps, I imagine you guys are planning on doing it, to hear from Cassie about the logistics. Was there an additional expense to the town with this?
Yeah.
Depends on the numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking to the numbers, I will, and to Drew's point earlier about like what the turnout and feedback has been from other municipalities, I do remember reading an article talking about the turnout of 16 and 17-year-olds in Brattleboro in the first election where they were allowed to vote on local elections, that they had four minors show up to vote in that election. So it's not a large sample size. We'll certainly, I think, look for more of those numbers from other municipalities. But my
That's why I thought that I don't mean to interrupt you. That's why I thought talking to principals, guidance counselors, that you get a better feel for what the interest is even. I mean, do they talk about that?
Yeah, well, and I think with, you know, to the point of social media and a lot of the advertising that they're already receiving, my experience with some younger folks has been that they are really politically engaged, perhaps more actually than a lot of adults that I know. And so I imagine if a change like this were to go through, we'd probably find very similar outcomes to adults voting, right? Where if there's an issue that they care about, they might show up in greater numbers, and then for a lot of other elections where there's nothing that really piques their interest, you'll get that low turnout. So I think it would mirror adult elections in the same way, which I guess to the idea of, you know, 10 kids could show up and actually change the outcome of an election. That is kind of how elections work already,
Right.
with
Yeah.
different populations.
That'd be amazing.
Well, more people with skin in the game, and the causation of that is, or the cause and effect of that is that the people representing the towns need to be more representative and speaking to more of the population. You know, we're going to take a look at that, and let's follow the numbers, let's follow the information that's given, and you know, perhaps we can do something of impact to the town one way or the other.
One other thing I'd like to just add is in regards to the numbers, is I think that there is also a challenge, and I don't know what was done, so this might be something you look into, but to advertise or to make people in that demographic aware, because they are not allowed to vote in state or national elections. They weren't previously allowed to. Suddenly they are allowed to. Are they aware that they are allowed to do this? I mean, I feel like that would be a challenge, and there would have to be some, effort made to reach out in some way to those folks to encourage them to participate. More so than maybe somebody who is over 18 who already kind of assumes that they are able to do
Well,
that,
then
right?
whose responsibility
And whose
does that fall on?
responsibility is that, right?
Because,
Agreed.
how much of what is the cost to the town to market to 16 and 17-year-olds?
Right.
Is Stuart going to get on TikTok? I would watch
Yeah, I would watch
the
that.
page, but
Raise my taxes for that one, I'm okay, yeah.
there's a lot potentially that is involved beyond just simply saying, okay, 16 and 17-year-olds are now allowed to vote.
Right.
Oh, no.
Like saying it doesn't mean it.
And there's also other ways to perhaps impact voter turnout if that's the focus of the charge. There was discussion about absentee ballots. Are there other areas to look at in terms of effectiveness in helping turnout if that's the focus, or is that a side focus that we put in other?
There's a lot of collateral implications.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, you have lots to talk about.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot there.
Did somebody have a comment? Yeah.
Do you allow public comment during your meetings?
Go ahead.
Well, I didn't know your format because some boards do and some don't. So I'm not trying to.
We'll let it go.
Okay. My name is Kelly Carroll, and I'm speaking as a taxpayer of Bennington. I am against giving 16 and 17-year-olds the ability to vote. And some of the reasons for that are, you were talking about the cognitive ability of a 16 and a 17-year-old, yet the state of Vermont has raised the age of accountability in court cases. It's in the process of going up to 24. So that's kind of like a mixed message. You're okay to vote, but we're not going to hold you accountable for other things. So that's something I think that you need to take into consideration. And I also think that there's an extremely significant difference between a 16-year and 17-year-old, or maybe even an 18-year-old who's working and paying state and federal taxes and going downtown and spending their dollars on our local economy, which I think is great. However, you're going to give them the ability to vote on my property taxes. And my property taxes went up an obnoxious amount this year. And you mentioned the turf vote. So there's another vote coming up on the 10th. It's just going to take 50 kids to come in and swing that. And again, my property taxes go up, and I am all for supporting the youth and fixing that field. I don't like the turf. I think it's an injury thing, whole other subject. But when you do talk about 16 and 17-year-olds, I think you need to look at the big picture, because you can't say, hey, you're old enough to vote, but you're not old enough to do this, and we're not going to hold you accountable. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you.
It's a lot in that committee.
I think you've got a lot in each committee.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do have
Thank you.
one question that I don't know the answer to. Do folks with sort of developmental disabilities or with dementia, they can still vote?
If they're registered, yes.
Okay. Okay.
And we make accommodation for all sorts of disabilities.
Okay. I'm inclined to let this continue if people have more on voting, but I think this has been really constructive so far, and will give us a lot of places to focus on for our next subcommittee meeting.
Could I respond to
Sure.
the public comment? So, to one of your points is, you'd mentioned 16, 17-year-olds that are working being perhaps different of mine. Is that it is a structure of qualification important to you? Or
I'm not
just
saying
trying
they're of a
to...
different mind. I'm just saying at 16 and 17, they're at a different place in life than some of the taxpayers who are property owners around here are. And I'm sure that I'm going to use the turf, they're all excited about that turf, you know, and I understand wanting to get more people involved in voting. I think that the numbers of people that vote, I would love to see that go up. But I just think maturity-wise, I think, you know, maybe they don't understand the whole picture because they don't know what they don't know. They're kind of, you know, the school system and being in school is different than being out in the real world. And I gotta tell you, I would not want to be in high school again for nothing. But I don't think that it's appropriate to say, okay, you can vote, but yet our state is saying you're not mature enough to be held accountable for your actions and other things in the world. And that's what I'm saying. So that, but I'm happy to talk with you offline any other time on it.
Voting, going once, going twice. Anything else on voting? Great. More to come on that. All right, our other sort of focus topic for today was the overflow committee, the sort of other group.
Which we actually are calling miscellaneous, but overflow, miscellaneous. The word other became hard to use as we talked about other things, and I think it is overflow or miscellaneous.
Yeah.
And we met. It is Drew and I that are on that subcommittee, and we talked a lot about what our focus is really as a committee, our subcommittee, to see what we would be responsible for. And I think that we agreed that, you know, we wouldn't necessarily be doing much until something comes in, probably from public comments or from, you know, conversations here that lies outside the scope of any of the other subcommittees, in which case then that would be put on our plates going forward and to discuss and make a recommendation or not. And so we would probably be meeting more ad hoc.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
I agree. It's a little early in the process.
Yeah.
We could be flooded the next meeting, you know, we don't know.
I mean, we
But,
did
yeah.
look at the other comment that came in that we talked about during the public comments that kind of, but we had the same conclusion that it was more of an ordinance thing than
Yeah.
a charter thing. So we did look at that one as it came in, but that was really the...
Yeah. Any questions about the miscellaneous group?
Have we agreed it's called miscellaneous? This is important for me.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We're just going to call it something different every time.
Because it is miscellaneous.
I mean, I think that's okay for today too. We had a bit of a longer public comment section, I think, than we typically will. So I think this maybe balances out.
Yeah.
Great. All right. We'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is discussing our public meeting dates. We talked about having sort of 2 public forums. We also talked about myself, and hopefully with the support of as many of you as possible, going and presenting occasionally to the select board. I'd like to start with that piece, maybe, the select board presentations. I know last week we talked about the first select board meeting in September being a good target, but it has occurred to me that I'm going to be in Montana at that time, so that might be challenging. So I wanted to suggest that potentially September 23rd and then October 28th would be good times to sort of provide status updates to the select board. That falls roughly after our first 4 meetings, September 23rd, and then right before our last 4 meetings, October 28th.
That sounds good. Don't we need to notify them multiple weeks in advance so we can get onto their agendas and like give our materials to them early? I'm pretty sure that's part of the process to get on the
Any
select board
written
meeting.
materials that should be in the packet have to be in the Wednesday
Day before.
before. But given that this is your desire, we'll certainly let the chairs know that the 23rd and the 28th will put you on the agenda.
Perfect. I just knew there was a little process there.
So those are my recommendations. I probably carry some weight since I'll be the one presenting, but I'm open to any feedback on that.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, all right, great.
Mhm.
So then thinking about the public forums that we've talked about holding, I know last week we talked about potentially Wednesday evenings being a good time for that. So I tried to look at some potential dates that might make sense in light of when I'm going to be presenting to the select board. And so I was thinking that the first forum potentially September 25th or October 2nd. And the second forum potentially October 30th or November 6th. And again, that roughly lines up with about a third of the way through our process where I think our goal at this point is to have sort of a clear idea of what direction we're heading with all the charges. And then the second forum about 2/3 of the way through our process where we'll sort of be finalizing the details of the recommendations we want to make.
Can I make one suggestion? School boards meet on Wednesdays,
Okay.
and it seems like we might have some interest, strong interest in the 16, 18-year-old voting.
Mhm.
Possibly schedule one for, it's hard to find any good night to do anything, but maybe that would be on a school board night. Just so if there are parents,
Do they meet every week or just once a month?
once a month, and basically someone ends up right with the school just starting right up. There's going to be a lot of special meetings.
That's true.
That's getting everything
Yeah.
sorted out, to be honest. Generally once a month, but a lot of to be Wednesdays. There's a lot of meetings on Wednesdays.
I have 3 board meetings on Wednesdays.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
The select board is also attempting to do listening sessions and has chosen Wednesday night after review of the availability of the fire facility. So if you're looking for a public space, Wednesday evening is a good evening
Okay.
generally for that space.
well, if we went, what time are the listening sessions?
Well, we just did the first one,
Right.
August 21st, and initially we were talking every other month, so it would be August, October.
Okay.
But the board really hasn't made a decision as to how
Okay.
often they want to do it, because the turnout was actually pretty good.
It was.
How far out do we need to schedule that?
The longer out, the better.
Yeah. School boards do meet generally around 5:30 or 6. So if we scheduled like around a 7 meeting, now we're running until a little later in the evening, but then we wouldn't have the conflict with, do I attend the school board meeting or do I attend this? If you want to stick with Wednesday.
You said school board meets generally once a month. Do we know when?
Yeah, just like.
While he's looking that up, I also wanted just to ask, okay, so I noticed that both of the dates that you proposed were after the select board.
Right.
And so I'm just gonna throw out there the idea of, do we want to do this before that? So in case something came up, we would have a Friday in between having the public session for us to talk as a group before you present on the Monday to the select board in case, I don't know, that was just a thought.
No, I that's a fair discussion to have. My thought was that if we held it after the select board, then we would be able to announce at the select board meeting that we're going to be holding one.
Right,
And then
that's a
we're
good
gonna
one.
go back to them again eventually anyway and present all of our recommendations at, like,
True.
which would happen again. So we'd be back in front of them again anyway.
That's a good point. Okay. I just wanted to
Okay.
think through it. Thanks.
Yeah, so North Bennington meets on the 11th. MAU meets on the 18th. SVSU meets on the 25th. I have SVU ESD meets on the 10th, which is a Tuesday. So
So the 2nd doesn't conflict with anything,
Yeah.
and neither does.
November 6th, probably.
yeah.
And I think that's a better day than the 30th, just being like the day before Halloween. It's a
Yeah.
busy time of year
Well, you could
usually.
come in costume.
Yeah, I was wondering.
That would be so fun.
I'm gonna come like dressed as the Bill from Schoolhouse Rock.
There you go. I like it.
Okay, so it seems like we're starting to narrow in on October 2nd and November 6th.
And what is the time frame?
Yeah, good question.
6 to 8.
6 to 8?
6 to 8? So,
Because I'll take care of getting
Yeah, that
getting
works.
Sure.
the room.
I was just throwing a number out.
Right.
Feel free to throw that right back at me.
Yeah, because people don't have to be there on time if they wander in, off
Well,
work
and if,
everything.
on the odd chance that a school board meeting got pushed, if it's going from 6 to 7, then there's still an hour, half of the meeting is there, and, perhaps we can hold public comment to, well, I mean, it'll just be continuous, so.
Well, and the fortunate thing right now is the school boards are still going virtual. I mean, there is room for in-person public comment at the new central office, but a lot of people now, they got used to watching them online, and
Well,
that's
so
what
there,
they're doing.
to your point, are we making that, we making this meeting a virtual option as well versus just in person and recorded?
You are not required by law to do so, but if we had requests, we could probably set that up. It's a little awkward.
Yeah.
Well, that's why I'm asking is
I would
it
think
almost,
Technical guys.
I think it would be awkward. I'd rather see people in person.
Yeah.
okay.
And they can still comment online, et cetera, so.
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. Great. So October 2nd and November 6th, 6 to 8 p.m.,
At the
Third.
firehouse?
third floor of the firehouse.
Fire facility, yeah.
Stuart, do we feel pretty confident those are available, or just kind of tentative right now?
We feel relatively confident.
Okay, good.
That's a little less than pretty confident.
Because we don't have the schedule in front of us of the firehouse.
We know a guy though.
No, but that helps me because on Wednesdays is our board of directors meeting with the medical group. So I can control some of those dates. They're not fixed.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's good to know if we cement the dates, I can try and work.
Okay.
Not that I'm that important.
You are.
No.
Yeah.
They don't care about finance people. They live in political. Yeah.
Great. Anything else on public meeting dates? No.
We can talk about promotion and all that as
Yeah.
it gets closer, working with Jonah, et cetera, our communications coordinator.
Okay, yeah, great. All right. Upcoming agenda items. I have one note here that myself and Carolyn and I believe Drew are all going to need to participate remotely next week. So the question was raised that in one of my subcommittees that perhaps the entire committee meets remotely next week while on
Yes.
even footing.
That makes sense, and then
Okay.
Stuart and I can be in here, because we
Yeah.
do have to have a physical location.
And then you can too just join by computer too.
Yeah.
That would be great for me because then I was gonna have a struggle next week too, so that would be
Okay.
much better for me too.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, so next week is an all virtual, except for this being the one physical location people can come to if they want to. Okay.
All right.
I'll send out a Zoom invite to everyone and work with Jonah to get that set up.
Great. Thank you, Dan. And Jonah.
Yes. Thank Jonah the most.
Also for next week's agenda, choose the focus topics.
Should we pick 2 different subcommittees to feature, like we did this week, or?
I think so. Unless there's you think there's a reason to revisit voting or miscellaneous again.
Probably not.
miscellaneous, right?
Well, I would really hope that the governance would meet
Let's try
before
and
the
meet
next
this-
meeting.
Governance.
Yeah, let's.
Maybe
Yeah.
governance and property will be
Yeah.
a little beefy.
Yeah. And I'll work around both your schedules, you just,
I'm pretty flexible.
so.
We'll set up an email and figure it out. You know,
Sounds perfect.
do that. Perfect. Okay.
Anything else that folks think should be on an upcoming agenda?
We'll be reading the public comments too. at the meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Any other business? Great.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Wonderful. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Wonderful. We are adjourned at
My babies have
4:19.
said I know it.
Just in time.
Just in time.